Grade 3s and 4s. Happy Monday. I hope you had a great weekend. You're going to start writing a rough draft of your story today. So I just wanted you to keep 3 things in mind while you're writing today. The first one is keep in mind how you introduce your story, or begin your story, sorry. I'd like you to introduce your characters and setting right away. So that might look like you setting the scene as you're beginning, or you could even start your story using dialogue where the characters are talking to each other, giving us information about the setting. Second thing I want you to remember is to show, don't tell. So what that looks like is you could say in your story, Jimmy was very angry. Or you could say, when Jimmy heard the bad news, he began to stomp his feet in rage and ran out of the room with rosy cheeks or something like that. I'm just showing you what it looks like when he's angry instead of telling you that he's angry. Let's see. You could show, instead of saying Lucy was sad, maybe you could say Lucy slumped down in her chair as tears began to roll down her face. So instead of saying Lucy was sad, we're showing the reader that she's sad. And that gives us more actions, more descriptions, and makes the story much more interesting. Because the better picture the reader can create in their mind, the more interested in the story they will be. The third thing is to use dialogue. So we practiced using quotation marks last week. I want you to use dialogue in your story to show things. So that means characters talking to each other. Yeah. So those are 3 things I want you to focus on today. And I want to read you a little bit of the story Dive to show you how they started it. Because they did a really good job of introducing the characters and setting right away. So Chapter 1. Starling came awake with a start and stared at her unfamiliar surroundings. The room was an undecorated, stark white, with 1 bed, her in it, and 1 chair empty. An antiseptic smell permeated the air. A hospital? Investigating a stinging feeling, she noted that her hand was bandaged and a tube protruded from the taped wrapping. Her eyes followed it all the way up to a plastic bag of clear fluid that hung from an IV pole by the side of the bed. She also felt the pure oxygen being administered through a nasal tube. Am I sick? There was a whoop in the hallway outside. She's awake! In barged Bobby Kaczynski, Dante Lewis, and Adriana Ballantyne, Stars Dive partners. The sight of their familiar faces triggered an avalanche of memory. Okay, so let's reflect back on how the author or the narrator introduced the characters and the setting. They said Starling came awake with a start and stared at her unfamiliar surroundings. The room was an undecorated, stark white, with 1 bed, her in it, and 1 chair empty. An antiseptic smell permeated the air. So we have a really good idea of where she is. Instead of just saying, Starling was an 8-year-old girl and she was in the hospital, we said where she was by explaining what happened, and they also thought about the 5 senses. They even included smell, because when they say an antiseptic smell permeated the air, we can almost smell what that would be like in a hospital. So they described the characters and the setting very well in the first couple sentences. The second thing is show, don't tell, which I also just talked about describing the setting or describing what's happening instead of just saying Starling was in the hospital. So for example, investigating a stinging feeling, she noted that her hand was bandaged and a tube protruded from the taped wrapping. Her eyes followed it all the way up to a plastic bag of clear fluid that hung from an IV pole by the side of the bed. She also felt the pure oxygen being administered through a nasal tube. So instead of just saying Starling was attached to or had an IV attached to her and was being given oxygen, they described it using lots of describing words, what that looked like and what she was feeling like. And then the third thing, using dialogue, we saw when our friends came in, they said, she's awake. So that shows us that they've been waiting, her friends have been there waiting for her to wake up for some time. So it just makes it more interesting when the characters speak. And yeah, that's everything. So have lots of fun writing your stories today. It's just a rough draft, it's just a start, so often when you go back and edit and revise, you'll change a lot of things, and that's okay. That's part of the whole writing process. You don't have to finish your whole rough draft today. You can finish it between today and tomorrow, so maybe try to aim for half of it today and half of it tomorrow, and that would be fantastic. Make sure you include your problem, your solution, and lots of description. Okay, well, have a great day. Talk to you tomorrow.